There is a country in Southeast Asia that spent decades being described as difficult to reach. Not impossible, not closed, just complicated enough that millions of travelers would look at the map, feel the pull, and then quietly choose somewhere easier instead. That country is Vietnam. And somewhere between 2023 and today, it changed. Not with a single announcement, not with a press conference that made global headlines. It changed the way most meaningful things change. Gradually, then all at once. New rules appeared. Old restrictions disappeared. Doors that were once half open swung fully wide. In 2025, Vietnam welcomed more than 21 million international visitors. That number broke every record the country had ever set, including the years before a pandemic reshaped the entire world. It wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence. It was the result of a series of policy decisions that most travelers never heard about until they were already standing in the arrivals hall, passport stamped, bags in hand, wondering why nobody told them it had gotten this easy. This is the story of what changed, what it means for you right now in 2026, and what almost nobody expected Vietnam to do. Not long ago, planning a trip to Vietnam meant setting aside time, real time, just for the paperwork. You had choices, but none of them felt simple. You could apply for a visa on arrival, which meant arranging a pre-approval letter through a third-party agency before you even booked your flight. You could apply at a Vietnamese embassy, which meant waiting, mailing documents, and hoping nothing went wrong. Or you could try the early e-visa system, which existed but was limited, restricted to citizens of a specific list of countries, valid for only 30 days, and accepted only at a handful of entry points. And then there was the rule that frustrated long-term travelers more than almost anything else. If you were from a visa-exempt country and your stay ended, you had to leave, and then wait 30 full days before you could legally return. For travelers combining Vietnam with the rest of Southeast Asia, that rule was more than inconvenient. It was a wall. The system wasn't hostile, it wasn't designed to keep people out, but it was friction. And friction, over time, sends travelers somewhere else. Then, quietly, almost without announcement, everything shifted. Vietnam has never been described as a country that moves fast with policy. It's a nation that tends to observe, consider, and move deliberately, which is exactly why what happened between 2023 and 2026 was so surprising to the people paying close attention. The changes came in waves. E-visa eligibility expanded to every country and territory on Earth. Stay limits stretched from 30 days to 90. The visa-free list grew longer, then longer again. Entry points multiplied, old restrictions vanished. And through all of it, the numbers climbed. By the end of 2025, Vietnam had welcomed 21.2 million international visitors, a 20.4% increase over the previous year, and nearly 18% above the last record set before the pandemic. To put that in perspective, global international tourism grew at roughly 4% that same year. Vietnam grew at 5 times that rate. While Thailand, long considered the dominant tourism force in Southeast Asia, saw visitor numbers stall and in some months even reverse, Vietnam kept accelerating. The 20 millionth visitor of 2025 arrived in December at Phu Quoc International Airport. She was a woman from Poland, a country that just months earlier had not been on Vietnam's visa-free list at all. That detail is not a footnote. It is the whole story in miniature, but the numbers only tell half of it. What actually changed, and how does it affect you specifically? For most travelers in the world today, the path into Vietnam runs through a single document, the electronic visa, known as the e-visa, and in its current form, it's quietly one of the most generous short-stay visas in Southeast Asia. Here is what it offers: availability to citizens of every country and territory on Earth, without exception. A stay of up to 90 days, enough time to travel the length of the country twice over, or to settle into one place and actually exhale. Both single-entry and multiple-entry options exist, giving travelers flexibility that the old system never allowed. The cost is straightforward. A single-entry e-visa runs $25 through the official government portal. Multiple entry is $50. Processing under normal conditions takes about 3 to 5 business days. If you need it faster, urgent processing can bring that down to just 1 business day. In genuine emergencies, visas have been issued in as little as 2 hours. there is one piece of this that really cannot be overstated. Apply only through the official Vietnamese government portal, avisa.gov.vn. The internet is full of third-party websites that look official, rank high in search results, and charge 3 to 5 times the real fee for the same document. Or, honestly, even worse, produce paperwork that doesn't hold up at the border. The official portal is the only safe option. One more requirement that catches travelers off guard. Your passport must be valid for at least 6 months from your date of entry. Not 6 months from today. 6 months from the day you actually land in Vietnam. Check that date carefully before you apply. One of the least discussed changes in Vietnam's recent visa evolution has nothing to do with who is eligible or how long they can stay. It has to do with where they can arrive. In December 2025, the Vietnamese government expanded the number of entry and exit points that accept e-visas. The addition of 41 new locations brought the total to 83, a number that represents a fundamental shift in how the country can be entered. Those 83 points span the full geography of the country. International airports, yes, but also 11 land border crossings and 26 seaports. For travelers coming overland from Cambodia, Laos, or southern China, this matters enormously. For cruise passengers arriving by sea, it matters just as much. What this means practically? Vietnam is no longer a destination you have to fly into from a major hub. It can now be woven into an overland journey through Southeast Asia in ways that were simply not possible before. The country has made itself reachable from almost every direction. One thing worth knowing, while e-visas are now accepted at airports across the country regardless of which one you arrive at, for land and sea entry specifically, it is still worth confirming. Your exact entry point is on the current approved list before you travel. Policies at land borders can evolve, and a quick check before departure takes less than 2 minutes. For citizens of 39 countries, the e-visa conversation is almost irrelevant. Because, well, they don't need one. Vietnam's visa-free program has expanded considerably, and the list now reads like a broad cross-section of the world's most frequent travelers. Citizens of Germany, France, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Russia, and the Scandinavian nations have long enjoyed visa-free entry for up to 45 days. But in August 2025, 12 more countries joined them. Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, Switzerland, Romania, Croatia, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Luxembourg, Slovakia, Slovenia, all added in a single government resolution, effective August 15, 2025, and valid through August 2028. For travelers holding any of these passports, entering Vietnam now requires nothing more than a valid passport, a return ticket, and showing up. The 45-day allowance is generous enough for a real trip, not a rushed week of highlights but an actual journey. The kind where you slow down enough to notice things. And buried inside this expansion was something even more significant, a change so quiet that many frequent travelers missed it entirely. If you traveled to Vietnam before 2023 under a visa-free arrangement, you know the rule. Leave the country and you wait. 30 days before you can return. It was one of those regulations that seemed minor on paper and enormous in practice. Long-term travelers in Southeast Asia build itineraries around country combinations. Vietnam into Cambodia, Cambodia into Laos, Laos back into Vietnam. The 30-day gap made that kind of looping journey legally complicated or simply impossible within a reasonable time frame. Many travelers gave up and left Vietnam off the circuit entirely. That rule no longer exists. Citizens of visa-exempt countries can now re-enter Vietnam immediately after departure, the same day, if they choose. There is no mandatory waiting period, no cooling-off interval, no bureaucratic pause between one visit and the next. You can cross into Cambodia for a few days and return without any additional paperwork or delay. This single change, small in its language, large in its effect, has made Vietnam far more compatible with the way independent travelers actually move through the region. It is the kind of detail that rarely makes the news, but reshapes travel patterns in ways that matter deeply to the people it affects. American passport holders are not on Vietnam's visa-free list. That is simply the current state of affairs, and for now it is unlikely to change quickly. But here is what that actually means in practical terms: very little. The e-visa covers the gap completely. For $25, an American traveler gets 90 days of legal presence in Vietnam, a stay longer than most people take. That works out to less than 28 cents per day for the right to be in one of Southeast Asia's most celebrated destinations. By any measure, it is among the most affordable visa arrangements an American traveler will encounter anywhere in the world. In 2025, 849,000 Americans visited Vietnam. The number has grown consistently year over year. Many of them arrive expecting a complicated entry process and discover, often with some surprise, that the whole thing took them about 15 minutes online and 3 days of waiting. The process for Americans is straightforward. A passport valid for at least 6 months past your entry date. An application submitted through avisa.gov.vn. Not through any third-party service, no matter how polished the website looks. Payment of the official fee. And then, a few days later, an approval document to print and carry with you. One area where Americans sometimes run into trouble: assumptions about visa extensions. Extending a stay inside Vietnam has become more strictly regulated in recent years. The days of casually extending for another month at a local travel agency are not as reliable as they once were. If you want 90 days, plan for 90 days from the beginning. Do not arrive expecting the rules to be more flexible than they are written. There is one corner of Vietnam where none of the above applies. Not the e-visa requirements, not the nationality lists, not the 45-day maximums. One place where, honestly, the only credential you need is an airplane ticket pointed in its direction. Phu Quoc Island grants 30-day visa-free entry to citizens of every country on Earth, without exception, provided you enter the island directly from an international point of origin and do not travel to other parts of Vietnam during your stay. And, that condition is worth reading again. If you land in Phu Quoc directly from an international flight, you can stay for 30 days, entirely visa-free, regardless of what passport you carry. No application, no fee, no waiting period. The island sits in the Gulf of Thailand, off Vietnam's southwestern coast. It's been developing rapidly. New resorts, expanding infrastructure, growing international flight connections. The Sydney Morning Herald recently described it as the new Phuket, noting that its beaches rival anything in Thailand while costing roughly a third as much. For travelers who have been watching Southeast Asia shift, watching Bali grow crowded, watching certain Thai islands price themselves out of reach, Phu Quoc represents something increasingly rare. A destination that is genuinely beautiful, genuinely affordable, and still early enough in its development that the edges haven't been smoothed away yet. Vietnam is not done changing. If anything, what has happened between 2023 and today is the foundation for something larger. From July 1st, 2026, 2 new visa categories come into effect. The UJ1 visa is designed for high-skill foreign professionals. Specialists in digital technology and fields Vietnam has identified as strategic priorities. The UJ2 visa covers their spouses and children under 18. Both carry validity of up to 5 years. For the right applicants, this is not a tourist visa. It is the beginning of something more like a home. The Golden Visa proposal, offering residency options of 5 to 10 years for investors, researchers, artists, medical professionals, and others, remains under development. But the direction is clear. Vietnam is building a legal framework for people who don't just want to visit, but want to stay, contribute, and build something here. Since August 2025, automatic visa exemptions have also been extended to a specific category of global figures. Leaders of the world's top corporations, internationally recognized artists, elite athletes, and influential figures in culture and tourism. Vietnam is, in quiet but deliberate ways, curating the kind of attention it wants to receive. A country that thinks in decades looks different from a country that thinks in tourist seasons. The policies being written today are designed to shape what Vietnam looks like in 2030 and beyond. With all of this openness, it's easy to assume that entering Vietnam has become completely frictionless. For the most part, it has. But a handful of mistakes continue to catch travelers off guard, and they're definitely worth knowing before you book anything. The most costly mistake is using an unofficial website to apply for an e-visa. Dozens of sites are designed to look like the Vietnamese government portal, rank highly in search results, and charge fees that are 3 to 5 times the official rate, sometimes for visas that are valid, sometimes for documentation that isn't. The only legitimate portal is a visa.gov.vn. Bookmark it. Use nothing else. The second most common issue involves passport validity. Many travelers check that their passport won't expire before their trip, confirm it's fine, and never think about the 6-month rule. Vietnamese immigration requires your passport to remain valid for at least 6 months from your actual date of arrival, not your departure date, not the date you apply. If your passport expires 5 months after you land, you may be denied entry despite having a valid visa. Third, visa-free does not mean stay as long as you like. The 45-day allowance for visa-exempt countries is fixed. It does not extend automatically, and the process for extending legally inside the country has tightened. Know your exit date before you arrive. Fourth, travelers staying with friends or family rather than hotels are responsible for registering their temporary residence with local authorities. Hotels handle this automatically. Private accommodations do not. The requirement exists and carries penalties if ignored. Small details, but the kind that turn an easy trip complicated at exactly the wrong moment. None of these changes happened by accident, and understanding why Vietnam made them helps explain how permanent, or how temporary, they might be. The government's stated goal is to welcome 35 million international visitors by 2030, and to grow tourism into a sector that contributes 13 to 14% of GDP. To reach that number from where Vietnam stood even 5 years ago requires not just marketing. It requires removing the barriers that sent travelers somewhere easier. Vietnam also watched what was happening to its neighbors and drew conclusions. Thailand, for years the benchmark of Southeast Asian tourism, saw its numbers stall in 2025. Vietnam's leadership looked at that data and made a deliberate choice to move in the opposite direction, to become more open, not less. But there is a quieter motive underneath the economic one. Vietnam has been named the world's leading heritage destination 6 consecutive years in a row. It has landscapes and culture that the awards recognize and that travelers confirm when they arrive. The country is not trying to become a budget destination for backpackers. It is building towards something more nuanced. Wellness tourism, luxury travel, cultural immersion, long-stay professional residency. Whether rapid growth can happen without eroding the qualities that make a place worth visiting is one of the oldest questions in travel. Vietnam has not answered it yet, but it is at least asking it. A door was closed, then it opened. That is, in the simplest possible terms, what has happened to Vietnam over the past 3 years. The paperwork got lighter, the wait times shortened, the list of who was welcome grew longer, the places where you could arrive multiplied, and a country that many travelers had quietly moved to the back of their list found its way back to the front. Not because of a sudden burst of marketing, but because the practical barriers to going there quietly disappeared. If you hold a passport from one of 39 countries, you can book a flight to Vietnam today and walk through arrivals with nothing more than your travel documents. If you hold a passport from anywhere else on Earth, a $25 visa and a few days of waiting stands between you and 90 days of freedom in one of Asia's most complex, rewarding, and genuinely beautiful countries. The records Vietnam broke in 2025 were not broken by accident. They were built, policy by policy, decision by decision, by a country that decided the world was worth inviting in. Check the official portal before you go. Confirm your entry requirements for your specific nationality. Make sure your passport has those 6 months of validity. And then, pack lighter than you think you need to. Stay longer than you planned. Vietnam is open. The question now is simply whether you're ready to walk through. For the most current visa information, always verify directly at evisa.gov.vn or through Vietnam's official Ministry of Foreign Affairs channels before travel, as policies continue to evolve.